we are so happy that Dr. Crystal Collier is here tonight to present Vaping, is History Repeating Itself? Dr. Crystal Collier herself is a person in long-term recovery, a therapist and an educator whose comprehensive prevention model, which teaches the neurodevelopmental effects of risky behavior to students, school staff, and families, was selected for the Prevention and Education Commendation from the National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence. Dr. Collier received the Torchbearer Award from the Texas Association of Addiction Professionals and the Outstanding Research Award from the Association of Alternative Peer Groups, and she was voted Counselor of the Year by the Houston Counseling Association. The Hope and Healing Center and Institute in Houston, Texas, granted Dr. Collier a research fellowship to support completion of the Neuro Whereabouts Guide, which was published in 2020, a book everybody should have. And since 1991, her clinical work focuses on adolescents and adults suffering from mental illness, behavioral problems, and substance use disorders. Her area of expertise includes adolescent neurodevelopment, prevention programming, parent coaching, addiction, family of origin work, and training new clinicians. And you can visit her website at drcrystalcollier.com or knowyourneuro.org. Dr. Collier, we are so grateful to have you back again tonight. Thank you for all the work you do. You know I'm a big fan, and I will turn it over to you.
I appreciate that. You too. I speak your praises everywhere I go, Aubrey. We're like fangirls of each other. So thanks for having me. I actually do this presentation in middle schools and high schools all over. And so I actually, a couple weeks ago, did this presentation 6 times in one day for 6 different middle schools. It was a wild day. So I really love to talk about this particular topic. We're going to focus on vaping and e-cigs tonight. And I really put this into the context of history repeating itself because, when you look out in the history, especially of America, this applies all over the world, but, humans get a great idea that we think is just going to make tons of money and be so successful. And then we find out later, oh, that was a really bad idea. And it hurt a lot of people. And some examples are this one. In the late 1800s, heroin was sold as a over-the-counter cough syrup. It was actually even touted as safe for children. And I don't know if you guys have seen some of the shows about this, but they found out that cocaine was very potent and addictive, and they used heroin as a way to titrate off the cocaine until they realized how addictive heroin was. But another example is in the early 1900s. Cocaine was the main ingredient in Coca-Cola. And if we look really into our recent history, we see that in the 1950s, many doctors actually got onto television shows and advertised for cigarettes. So I want to share with you guys one of those old adverts.
If you were to follow a busy doctor as he makes his daily round of calls, you'd find yourself having a mighty busy time keeping up with him. Time out for many men of medicine usually means just long enough to enjoy a cigarette. And because they know what a pleasure it is to smoke a mild, good-tasting cigarette, they're particular about the brand they choose. In a repeated national survey, doctors in all branches of medicine, doctors in all parts of the country were asked, "What cigarette do you smoke, doctor?" Once again, the brand named most was Camel. Yes, according to this repeated nationwide survey, more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. Why not change to Camels for the next 30 days and see what a difference it makes in your smoking enjoyment? See how camels agree with your throat. See how mild and good tasting a cigarette can be.
She's kind of creepy, I think, actually. It's amazing to me. And of course, now we have these things that show up in all shapes and sizes. This one in particular, the one down there on the bottom right, we all know the Juul and the organization and the history that the organization has. What is interesting to me about these contraptions is that they were born out of a really good intention. So when we see, unfortunately, movie stars, actors, people that vape out in public and it looks so cool, it sends the wrong message to kids. I've actually been reading a really good book lately. It's called The Mediatrician's Guide, all about how media portrays different risky behaviors. And you guys know that every teen movie that is out there is full of underage sex and lots of substance use. And the three things that it really perpetuates is that it is prevalent. Everybody out there does it. That's what these movies would like people to think, that it is risk-free, that there's no harm to it. Everybody does it. These things are out there. And that, it's something that's really normal. And as we know, they don't show you the hard stuff. They don't show you pictures. Watch out. This is a graphic picture. Pictures like this of this young man whose lithium-ion battery in his vape blew up in his face. They might show you the funny picture that they have of the gentleman whose vape blew up in his pocket and hurt some very sensitive skin areas. But we don't see some of the difficult things. I was talking to Aubrey earlier that I've responded to 2 cases of CIP, cannabis-induced psychosis, over the past 2 weeks. And I live in Texas. It's not legal here, but the Delta 8 dispensaries are all over now. And of course, one of the main ways that people are using it is through vaporizers. But again, the rationale for this development had a pretty innocent intention. This is the man who invented the vaporizer. His name is Han Lick, and he is an engineer from China. He developed the vaporizer in 2003, and his impetus was that his father died of lung cancer from smoking cigarettes. So he wanted to create a contraption that would allow people to use nicotine, specifically nicotine, in a way that was a lot harmless than the traditional fire hazards and lung issues associated with cigarettes. So here is where he got his idea from a fog machine, a theatrical fog machine. You guys might see these in theaters or haunted houses. The exact same stuff that makes theatrical fog is what is in e-liquid. Now, of course, it comes in all different kinds of colors and flavors today, but it's the exact same chemical goop. So when this started really hitting the United States, and I was seeing kids with vaporizers in my groups that I was doing, we didn't even know what this was. Schools were contacting us to try to figure out what their policies should be. Now, most schools have changed their policies to include vaping and not just cigarettes, but it's really pervasive. So I wanted to really understand what's going on and what this stuff is. So I did a pretty deep dive into the ingredients of e-liquid. And the primary ingredient is propylene glycol, which I had never heard of before. Now, if you work down on the ship channel here in Houston, you would probably know this term very well because we have huge industries down here of chemical manufacturers who make a lot of propylene glycol. It is a solvent, a chemical that's put into solvents and cleaning agents, household products. The main ingredient in antifreeze is propylene glycol. The second ingredient in e-liquid is vegetable glycerin. Again, I hadn't heard of this either before I started doing this research. But what I learned is that vegetable glycerin is a food preservative. Now, here is something very interesting. There is an association of propylene glycol manufacturers. Of course there is, right? There's an association for everything, so that makes sense. The association, if you go to their website, on the front page, there is a warning that says, we do not agree with propylene glycol going into the human lung and digestive tract. So interesting, because I'm sure that doesn't keep them from selling it to e-liquid manufacturers, right? But why they say this is interesting. There's a lot of research out there that shows how dangerous this stuff is. But here is what the manufacturers do. They quote the FDA. So the Food and Drug Administration is the entity that is supposed to make sure that food and drugs are safe for human consumption. But as you guys know, it's a small agency and it's not funded enough to be able to oversee everything. So there's a lot of foods and supplements out there that the FDA never actually gets to. And if you own something like that, you have to put that on your label. Most of us don't read those labels anyway. But for decades, vegetable glycerin food preservatives have been included, of course, in our food in small, tiny trace amounts. And because the FDA has approved of that and has said there are negative effects, but if it's in small, minute amounts, then it will have minimal negative effects on the digestive tract. But we have absolutely nothing from the FDA that says it shouldn't go in lung tissue. But all the manufacturers of e-liquid will tout the FDA law and say, even the FDA says it's safe and allows it. But that is not true. The FDA allows it in food products in small trace amounts, but not in the lungs. And so that is really why the association has that on their front page. They don't want to be sued for that, so they have a warning out there. But like I said, they still sell this product to the manufacturers of e-liquid. Now, the third ingredient in e-liquid is nicotine, of course. And you have probably seen or have heard that you can buy e-liquid with high amounts of nicotine all the way down to 0. Now, why would they put an e-liquid out there that didn't have any nicotine in it at all? Well, the idea is that they can sell 0 milligram e-liquid that has no nicotine in it to anyone underage. Now, the FDA did a random selection study. They went all across the United States and they randomly selected 0 milligram e-liquids and tested them. And guess what? Almost all of them had trace to large amounts of nicotine in them. So unfortunately, the FDA does not have time or the manpower to go around and test all these products. So at least they did that. They did a random test and put out an advisory. But I think it's really important to note that it's a marketing technique, right? To get kids hooked and to get them hooked on it early, making them think that it's cool to do this without nicotine and then moving their way into it. Okay, so of course, there are a lot of artificial flavorings. And I thought this was I asked my old client if I could use this story, and he said yes. When I was working, I had a 17-year-old client quite a few years ago now who was hooked on e-cigarettes. And he told me that his favorite e-liquid flavor was unicorn vomit. Now, I thought that was really interesting, right? That they would actually make a flavor called unicorn vomit. But who are they marketing to? They are not marketing to I wouldn't want, oh, gross. Like, I wouldn't want that. But kids think that's so cool. It's more like a fruit flavored, according to him. But this was back when the thing to do was buy the little bottles of e-liquid and to load your own cartridges with it. And now it's much more common to just buy a puff bar that has a preloaded cartridge in it. Now, do you think Mr. Han Lick, the engineer who created the vaporizer, do you think that he went out and did all this research to make sure that it was a safer alternative? Of course not. And so when I did a deep dive into the research, it was so interesting. This is a true story. I was doing a presentation at a local high school here in Houston that is notorious for graduating Harvard and Stanford people from high school that go on. And one of the snarkiest teenagers that I ever met said, don't you understand that the National Health Service of England has come out in favor of e-cigarettes? Now, at that moment, I didn't know that that had happened, and I didn't believe him because I thought there is no way that a national health organization of any country would come out and endorse a product that at that time had less than 5 years of research behind it. I thought for sure they wouldn't. Well, guess what? Yep, I was wrong. And so I'm going to show you just a little clip of a video interview that was done about the study that the Health Service of England used as the basis for their endorsement. Just a little clip.
Nasty. Oh. The vapor from a coffee-flavored e-liquid, not so much. There's a little dampness. It smells like coffee.
So I'm going to show you a picture of this study. Here's what they did. And they took these machines that would smoke a cigarette and would smoke a vape product. And they filtered all of the excess, the exhalations, onto cotton balls. Now, if you can see on the left, this is the result of the nicotine, the cigarette smoke. And of course, you can see the tar and all the gross stuff on that. And then on the right, you can see what is left over from the e-cigarette, the e-liquid components. Now, it was interesting because you saw on the video, the man picked it up and said, oh, not so much junk. It's a little damp and it smells like coffee because they were testing coffee flavored e-liquid. But the dampness was the interesting thing. Y'all, this is the study that the English Health Organization that governs all the healthcare of Great Britain based its endorsement on. I could not believe this when I saw this. I watched the videos and looked at the research over and over and over again because I just could not believe that. But I think this is an example of history repeating itself. And it's interesting, they have backed off of this quite a bit, but they still do endorse it as an alternative. So let's do a deep dive into the advertisements. So I think you guys know, especially if you're here on an Every Brain Matters presentation, that the word marketing is a very hot term, right? The word medicine is a marketing term. It is not a true medicine. But check out this advertisement. Oh, who are they advertising to? What age group are they advertising with this? You know, this is Minions or something little kids, like what elementary kids love, right? I mean, they really want to start you off young. Okay, so here's what they claim, that there are no offensive odors. If you guys know anybody who vapes, sometimes you might smell that gross, fruity, flavory smell around them. I think they're less offensive than cigarette smoke, but they are still pretty offensive. They claim that vapes are cheaper than smoking cigarettes. You'll save a lot of money. And I think that's actually true, especially as much as cigarettes are taxed. They say that you can vape in more places. This is becoming less and less true. They say that it's a safer alternative than traditional tobacco products. We're going to do a deep dive there. But this was the most interesting claim that I found. They said that you will reduce your cigarette cravings and your nicotine withdrawal symptoms. And this is an interesting claim because you're really just replacing one nicotine inhalation system for another. So you actually won't have any cravings or withdrawals because you're still on nicotine. So I think this is like a well-crafted claim because there are people out there who really believe that they won't have those anymore. And because they're not smoking cigarettes, that they're out of the woods. But as you guys know, they're still very addictive to nicotine. So what I wanted to do and what I like to do with kids is really teach them how to critically analyze ads. And this is what I want parents to do when you're sitting watching TV with kids, because as you see underage sex, as you see lots of very prolific substance use on shows, characters that you know would never use drugs are using drugs on shows. I really hope that you ask your kids some very critical questions about that. So let's do a critical examination of one of those ads. So this ad comes from Mystic E-Cigs, and Mystic E-Cigs says, at Mystic, we understand that you care about what you put in your body. So here's the lowdown. Mystic E-Cigs contain only 4 ingredients: pure, clean water, flavoring, nicotine, and propylene glycol. Is that not an interesting ad? Like really well crafted, I say. But when you look at this, propylene glycol, just 4 ingredients. Well, one thing I do want you guys to know is that there's no pure clean water in e-cigs. There's just not. There definitely is flavoring. That's the e-liquid. Lots of nicotine, or maybe none at all. But when they say it's a common preservative, it's really kind of a, pardon the pun, a smoke and mirror game here, right? They're not telling you exactly what is in that. They're making it seem that it is really risk-free. It's harmless. They even put down here that unlike traditional cigarettes that contain hundreds of harmful ingredients, Mystic E-Cigs contain only ingredients you can understand. So they don't actually say harm less, but they say that you can understand. Okay, here's another one. Are e-cigs safe? This is interesting because what they would like you to believe is that they're comparing apples to apples. And so they have all these harmful toxic chemicals listed next to tobacco cigarettes. And then they have, okay, let's look and see what an e-cig has in it. It's got a battery, an atomizer, a cartridge, e-liquid, nicotine, and natural flavoring. Again, they're not telling you what is actually in that e-liquid or natural flavoring. So when I looked into this, here's what I found. The truth is that every cigarette has between 3,600 and 5,000 harmful toxic chemicals. That's a lot. And e-liquid has between 20 and 50 harmful toxic chemicals. So if you really are comparing apples to apples, we can understand a little bit about why the National Health Service in England endorsed e-cigs, because it does look like there is less, and there are significantly less chemicals in e-liquid. But the bottom line is they're still harmful toxic chemicals. They do have that in common. Now, a lot of the harmful chemicals that you get in tobacco cigarettes are caused by the flame, the combustion, and it's the same thing for e-cigs. So if you heat up e-liquid, which is what an atomizer and cartridge does, you actually get components or emissions. So just like tobacco, once it burns, it changes its molecular form. And it's the same thing for e-liquid. It also does that. And those components are broken down into formaldehyde and acetaldehyde. Those are the main two emissions that e-liquid breaks down into. Another chemical called acrolein, which has been shown to be really dangerous for the eyes and the respiratory system. Diacetyl is another emission that's actually very popular. You may have even heard of that because it has been linked to a disease called popcorn lung disease. So let me divert here and tell you the story about that. Because in popcorn, let's see, what is it? Microwave popcorn factories, one of the main ingredient that they put into microwave popcorn butter is diacetyl. And that diacetyl has been linked to an illness that many microwave popcorn workers have come down with. And this is an x-ray of one of those workers. So this is a really neat picture. It's an x-ray looking from the top down into the lungs, from the top. So interesting. You can see the spinal cord right there at the bottom in this picture. Now, what you're seeing is lung tissue that has damaged areas. Those little holes, this arrow is pointing to one of them. Those are areas where diacetyl has burrowed into the lung tissue and literally made it necrotic. And so little teeny tiny areas of cells that have died, making lungs look more like Swiss cheese. That's what popcorn lung disease. And the same chemical that causes this from microwave popcorn butter is an emission of e-liquid. And of course, heavy metals, and then the breakdown component of propylene glycol, which is ethylene glycol. These are the harmful toxic chemicals we're putting into our lungs if we vape e-liquid. Okay, I want to switch over to talking about their claim that if you switch to a vape, you can stop smoking. Now, this is a really powerful claim because I'm not sure if you guys know the statistics on this, but you can become addicted to nicotine the first, second, or third time you use it. Nicotine is the most powerful substance on the face of the earth that causes addiction. There are a few different agencies that put out the top 100 most addictive drugs every single year. You can see them shift as fentanyl came up the list and different things like that. Nothing that I've ever seen has bumped nicotine off of the #1 spot. Most addictive drug on the face of the earth. And so for smokers, it takes on average 10 years for the average smoker to stop smoking. 10 years of trying it. So being a non-smoker myself, that's exactly my average. I was really ready to stop smoking when I was about 20, 21, 22, and I started trying to quit when I was 24 and did not successfully quit until I was 34 years old. So it took me that amount of time. But the World Health Organization has done meta reviews and analyses on this issue. And they found in the literature that about 31% of people who stop or start vaping in order to stop smoking actually were able to stop smoking. Now, in order for a smoking cessation product to meet criteria that says it actually is a legitimate quit tool, you have to meet the 70th percentile. It has to help at least 70%, and it just doesn't muster those numbers. But what is very interesting about the research that I found when I was looking at this is that a large percentage of people who start vaping with the intention to quit smoking end up doing both. They end up actually with two issues, and they switch back and forth. Now, when we look into these contraptions in the products, Juul is an excellent example of a company that has figured out how to make a lot of money very quickly and create a really new and innovative product. You can see all those big vaporizers out there, the mod boxes and those huge square things have been reduced down to these teeny tiny little products that fit inside your USB port to recharge. No lithium battery needed. But the most innovative thing about the Juul is this company figured out how to synthesize nicotine into a salt, which actually reduces the molecular size of it. That is why they can put nicotine into this teeny, teeny, tiny pod, which is so deceiving because you think, oh, it's just this little pod. Like it can't be that much. But what we know is that every time you use a pod, you are using the equivalent of 1 to 2 packs of cigarettes. And every time you puff on a Juul, you get 30% more nicotine per puff because it's so potent. Now, this was interesting. I asked my client who loved unicorn vomit. He actually switched over to the Juul when they came out. He was so excited because this was back then when they still had flavors. So he had he switched from unicorn vomit to another flavor that Juul made. And he was really getting more addictive and spending more money than he wanted to. And he said, Doc, do you think I'm getting addicted? And I asked him how many pods he was using. He told me he was using 3 pods a day. 3 pods a day. And I said, well, tell me why you've gone up so much. He's like, well, because I can sneak this into school and nobody sees it. And I said, but when you exhale the vape, the vaporizer, how do you hide that? He said, oh, I don't exhale it. I just hold it in. Oh, gosh, I kept thinking of his poor lungs. So when I wanted to know, like, how would you know? They tell you how many milligrams are in it, right? There's 20 milligrams in 1 pack of cigarettes. But in a Juul, there's 41.3 milligrams of nicotine. And so most people don't know what that means. What is 41 milligrams of nicotine? I don't know. How much is too much? How much, they never used to tell you in coffee. And a few years ago, they started telling you, okay, here's how much caffeine is in an espresso or in the different Starbucks, sizes, so that you would know what's healthy, what's not healthy. And so, he didn't know that this was like using almost or more than 2 packs of cigarettes. And this, the puff bar, it advertises 50 milligrams of nicotine. That's quite an equivalent. Now, this is the scariest thing to me, this stuff. You can buy bottles of pure salt nicotine, 200 milligrams of nicotine, and preload your own e-liquid or your e-liquid cartridges in your mod boxes. Oh, that is an equivalent of a lot of nicotine. Okay, so this is the most fun part about this presentation, you guys, because I think this is so amazing how nicotine works. Nicotine is the #1 most addictive substance on the face of the earth, but it doesn't cause intoxication. So there's one other drug that makes the top 20 list every single year of a most addictive drug that also does not cause intoxication, and that is caffeine. Highly addictive drug, but you cannot get high or drunk on nicotine or caffeine. This is why we can drink and smoke while we drive, right? Because it doesn't cause impairment in that way, but it does cause addiction quickly. So I want you guys to understand how that works and what we see. So in 8 seconds of ingesting nicotine, it crosses the blood-brain barrier, going straight into your bloodstream and hitting your brain. It's so potent, you guys, that 1 drop of pure nicotine will kill you, which is why they use it in pesticides. It is one of the #1 ingredients and has been for years that we actually put in our pesticides to kill bugs. We also know that nicotine and, of course, smoking slows lung growth, reduces lung function, It causes the heart rate to beat 3 times faster than it should. And so all smokers breathe heavier and their heart beats faster. We know that it's linked and can cause cancer, lung disease. But for me, one of the negative things, and we want to teach kids, is that nicotine can arrest brain development. It doesn't do so as pervasively as marijuana or alcohol does, but it does. And what we also know, interestingly, is that they all go together, right? Kids who end up smoking or vaping end up doing all the other things too. Okay, here is my favorite part. And if you have my book, this graphic is actually in the book. I believe it's in the middle school chapter. And so it explains why nicotine is so addictive. So within 8 seconds of you inhaling, it gets into your bloodstream, going straight to your brain, and it tells your brain and body to increase adrenaline. So you get a rapid hit of adrenaline. And that is what people will say feels like the hit. Oh, I love that hit, users will say. Like, I immediately feel that. The heart starts to race. Blood rushes to your hands, to your feet, into your eyes because it thinks that you're about to get busy and run and exercise. And because it revs up your heart rate so fast, it immediately tells your body to release glucose so that you can burn that energy. And this is also what triggers a release of insulin to balance that out, right? So glucose goes up, then insulin goes up so that we have a balance. All of that results in increasing your basal metabolic rate. Your metabolism goes up. And this is why when people quit smoking, they gain weight, because your metabolism goes back to normal. And there you go. Okay. But that's not all. Wait, I feel like a cheap TV advertisement. Oh, wait, there's more. The next thing that happens is your muscles have a surge of acetylcholine release. Okay, so acetylcholine is the chemical that your muscles use to rev up. So muscle tissue expands and then, of course, contracts, right? That's what your muscles do. And the way that happens is your brain uses acetylcholine to tell your cells to do that. So you get this increase in acetylcholine, and then you get a dopamine hit. You feel calm and happy. So dopamine is the neurochemical that signals that you're doing something good for your survival, and it gives you a reward when you do that. Nicotine tricks your body into thinking that this is good for survival by releasing dopamine stores. The next thing that happens is a neurochemical called glutamate is released. Glutamate is really very interesting. Every time you see an increase in dopamine, you'll see an increase in glutamate, because glutamate helps you create memories. It is actually the neurochemical that helps form your memories. And so your brain is basically saying, wow, this is so good for your survival. You should remember this. And then last but not least, you get a big surge of endorphins and enkephalins, your body's natural opiates. Now, this is exactly what happens when a runner is running long distance. Their muscles break down and their body releases endorphins, your body's natural opiates, to relieve the pain of that muscle tissue breaking down. So your nicotine basically tricks your body into thinking you're exercising, and it gives you a runner's high in the end. This is why nicotine is so addictive. Now, here is a good comparison. Out of 100 people who use alcohol, 16% of them will become an alcoholic. Now, about 25% of 100 people are going to abuse it, but about 16% get diagnosed with dependence. Out of about 100% of people who use cannabis, 17% will become dependent. Now, back in the 1960s, that used to be 9%. That number is going up. And I anticipate that it'll continue going up commensurate with the potency increasing. But out of 100% of people who use nicotine, 68% of them will become dependent upon it. That is really a testament to how potent it is. Now, I mentioned before that a lot of times what you'll see is they go hand in hand. Teen smokers are about 9 times more likely to abuse or become dependent on alcohol, and about 13 times more likely to become dependent and use illegal drugs. This is why nicotine is the #1 gateway drug, because what it's doing is it's increasing dopamine receptors, not to mention your nicotinic receptors, but it is priming the brain to become addicted to other substances. Once you have a few too many dopamine receptors, and then you use alcohol, marijuana, or another substance, you already are growing a tolerance for those because of what nicotine has done to your brain. Now, I want to go back to some critical analysis of ads. And this one to me was so disturbing. Now, I got this in my email, which is hilarious that I get emails like this, but I do research on high-risk behavior, so I sign up for all kinds of stuff. And this one literally came to my inbox. This is probably about 10 years old by now, but it's quite interesting. It says, do you know what you're putting in your lungs? Smoking versus vaporizing. Why smoking marijuana isn't ideal, but why vaporizing marijuana is better for you. It's so interesting because they say over here that the respiratory hazards of smoke are due to toxic byproducts of combustion, not the active ingredients in the plant, which is really contradictory, right? Because it's the active ingredients in the plant that are combusted that actually turn into toxic byproducts. So I like, what, right? But over here, it says vaporizing marijuana emits vapor that's 95% smoke and carcinogen free. I'm like, what? Like, what? I get this. It's just such an interesting ad that is complete and utter bullshit. Sorry. Like, it really is. Oh boy. And this came in my inbox. I just you should have seen me running around the office showing this to people. Now, I know that you guys know what these are. You know, there's so many people who don't understand that the e-liquid, that dabs, wax, honey, shatter, all this stuff. Basically, I feel like I'm explaining this to the choir here, but you guys know that they take the green leafy bud, boil it down into hash oil. Hash oil has actually been around for a long time, but it was created based upon the low potency marijuana. And this was the most potent stuff you could get back then, was the hash oil. Because when you boil down the green leafy bud into hash oil, you're getting the concentrated marijuana. Now today, they just make this synthesized, right, in big, huge labs that produce this stuff already. They don't even have to worry about the potency because they can manage that with the chemicals and the machinery that they use. And so this is another ad that actually came in onto my my email server, and it says miracle smoke. Remember, you guys, when you teach kids how to critically analyze ads, there are certain, and in my book, in the tools section, I have a page about that will help you warn kids about the words that really want to spike our attention, that give us red flags. Miracle is one, natural is another. So this says the most powerful cannabis e-liquid available, and you get a free vapor starter kit with your paid order. So they'll just get you addicted right away and start you off. But here's the funny part. Look at these little checks. It helps reduce feelings of anxiety. And there's a little asterisk. I could never find what the asterisk was connected to because there was no fine print that told you about this. But Maybe it's a sign for bullshit. I don't know, because we all know that cannabis, whether it's vaped or smoked, it increases anxiety and doesn't reduce it. It says that it reverses damage caused by alcohol. Again, we got another little asterisk. Again, that's the sign for bullshit. And then, of course, it says you don't need a prescription, and it's legal in all 50 states, which is the only true thing I've seen, is that CBD is legal in all 50 states and in various shapes and forms. But again, the FDA has not approved this of for mass consumption. And I think this is so interesting because the FDA has approved 2 marijuana medicines and 1 cannabidiol medicine, and they have studied it, but it is used to treat the symptoms of very severe illnesses. One of those is wasting syndrome from HIV, because marijuana is really great for giving you the munchies and helping you eat. CBD is very good for reducing inflammation and pain that's caused by cancer and glaucoma and multiple sclerosis, other seizure disorders and swellings. There is no research that shows that it actually cures any illness. And the majority of research that we see says it increases anxiety, paranoia, increases lack of motivation, anhedonia, all of the above. Okay, so I'm going to go back to e-liquids from nicotine. You guys remember in 2019, the E-Valley deaths. Now, I can never remember what it stands for, but it's a really long, like vaping and blah, blah, blah illness. So back then, this was interesting because we saw the rates of death and illness skyrocket within just a few months. Now, here's what we learned is that there's a lot of people out there who can buy all the chemicals that go in e-liquid separately from Mexico and China. You can have them Amazon drop delivered to your front door, and then you can stop up your bathtub and put all of them in your bathtub, and then buy some e-liquid cartridges and fill them. And then also print off some e-liquid labels, and it looks pretty good. I mean, maybe it looks pretty good. But we know that these experiments that people do in their bathtub have happened all over. And that was really the cause of this, is that we had secondhand vaping products being sold all over the country. It was interesting, though, only 17% of people who contracted this illness only use nicotine products. The majority of them actually use marijuana products. So we saw that home growers, people who made nicotine carts and marijuana carts for e-cigs, were making this stuff at home in their bathtub. And they were getting a hold of some chemicals that had acetone in it, which is so weird because, acetone, if you've ever gone and got your nails done, that's what you take your nail polish off with, is the acetone product there. And they were putting that into these chemicals. But when you buy them from China, who knows what's in it? Big experiment. And so, okay, again, this goes back to my point of, is history repeating itself? And are we going to learn our lesson? Now, from tobacco, here is what we learned. We know how dangerous it is. Now, when I see these lungs, oh gosh, if you've ever been to the bodies exhibits at the Museum of Natural Science, they really show them, and seeing them up front and personal, especially taking your kids to see that, is incredible. The good news is that when a smoker quits smoking, after 7 years, it can go from what it looks like on the right to what it looks like on the left. Your lungs can heal. So here's what I learned about lung tissue. So I used to work at the VA hospital, and a couple of pulmonologists would tell me about this, that the lung tissue, it's like a big sponge, and it's constantly wringing itself out and cleaning itself. And so whenever you get like a cold, you snot up a lot of stuff, like you sneeze out a lot of gross stuff, right? Your lungs are constantly cleaning themselves like a sponge, wringing itself out. And so they're designed to do that, to filter out the negative things in the air. And so if you are lucky and you are able to stop in time so that your lungs can heal themselves, then golly, I just hope. I'm 50, I'll be 54 next month. So after 20 years of not smoking, I'm hoping my lungs are nice and pink and healthy again. But we also know that when we use cigarettes, and now we have studies that show that when moms vape or smoke at a young age, that it causes babies to be born with low birth weights and other birth defects. We know that it can have negative effects on lots of organs. And this is an interesting one. Kids always go, wow, look at that. So can you guess which twin smoked and which twin didn't? Right? So the largest organ in the body, always ask kids, do you know what the largest organ is? There's going to be one kid out there who's like, the skin. The skin is your largest organ. And nicotine and all the negative chemicals in e-cigs and tobacco products rob the body of moisture. They take the moisture out of our tissues. We also know that if you use tobacco in your gums, that it can cause cancer and tooth decay. But if we take a look at e-liquid, here is a set of healthy lungs on the left. Remember, we're looking from the down into the body. You can see the spinal cord right there. On the left, you see an X-ray of a young man who's got some healthy lung tissue. And on the right, you see an X-ray of a young man from Utah who had EVAL-E. So you can see the congestion in his lungs, and to the point where his lungs can't breathe for him anymore. So the lungs are constantly trying to heal themselves. But when that e-liquid, and you've seen people, you know the difference between smoke and e-liquid. E-liquid vapor hangs in the air. It's heavier. So when you heat up that gooey, honey-like substance that e-liquid is, it does change shape into a vapor that can be inhaled. But once it's in your lungs, it re-solidifies. And it turns into that goopy, gross stuff that causes congestion, inflammation, fluid to back up and build up, and pneumonia. So here is a Texas kiddo who experienced a scary a moment in time. I want you to listen to this video and remember how long he vaped for.
It's a distressing sight. 17-year-old Tristan Zoffeld fighting for his life in a hospital bed.
I woke up just throwing up everywhere, and my heart was just pounding out of my chest, going 100 miles an hour.
Coughing, wheezing, eventually his lungs failing. Doctors hooking him up to a ventilator and placing him in a medically induced coma. His parents fearing for the worst.
The day they intubated him was the worst day of my life. Every day just kept progressively getting worse.
And extremely terrified of, for my life.
Hospitalized for 18 days last month, Tristan lost 15 pounds and said he had to relearn to walk.
We don't see previously healthy 17-year-olds that sick that quickly.
As soon as I woke up from that coma, I decided I knew what I wanted to do.
Now he has a message to share about vaping. He says the habit he picked up in 8th grade is what almost killed him.
This is really what could happen.
This child almost died from this. This is not, I just got a little bit sick and got well.
It was a scary thought for anybody. They had no idea how to treat it either, and that's kind of the scariest part is we don't know, the long-term effects, and, we don't even really know the short-term effects of vaping.
Oh, I forgot he didn't say it in this clip. He started vaping in 8th grade and only vaped for about 1.5 years. That's it, not much. So if I haven't introduced myself to you guys, I started studying this stuff because I was a kiddo who made some bad decisions. And this is really my why, is that I want young people to fall in love with their brain and their brain development, to know exactly what it does. and that there is a rule, the brain's rule, that says use it or lose it. And so when we think about what are we losing if we don't use, it's all of our executive functioning skills, our basic thinking, feeling, and doing skills that get arrested when we start engaging in substance use. And if those of you guys have kids who have done this, you know what that looks like. Now, the good news is that once we get off of them and our brain heals, these can start to grow again because we grow dendrites for the rest of our lives that are the connectors in our cells. But this is really why we have laws. And so the good news about this topic is that we have raised the age limit for using nicotine from 18 to 21. This is why it really makes me mad at Canada, because you guys know that their marijuana laws are 18 and above. And I'm like, really, you guys? The frontal lobe is at 70, 80% developed. And so we try really hard as science comes out to use it to help inform the law. But as Every Brain Matters and all of you guys out there that are fighting for legislation to reverse some of the laws that have legalized marijuana, I am behind you 100%, because we tend to repeat ourselves. We tend to have a lot of people who want to make a lot of money and don't really care about public health. But we got to teach our kids, like, we don't go to the liquor store for medicine. We just don't, because it's not a pharmacy, right? It's not. But if we think this is a pharmacy, we have to learn the same lesson, right? All over again. This is not a place to get medicine. So for my book, The Neuro Whereabouts Guide, I studied 18 different high-risk behavior and how they affect the brain. I put it all into this book. It's a 400-pager. I appreciate your endorsement for that, for the book, Aubrey. But I did put everything in the book into an online plug-and-play prevention program for schools and families and students. It's called Know Your Neuro. Strong brains make healthy choices. And what you see is all the topics and skills are listed here. All of the videos, if you want to just look it up by age group, you can find it there. There's a family page that has all of the prevention dates on it, tools for families, things that you would need to know. So please check out knowyourneuro.org. I was telling Aubrey, I'm getting a lot of calls from Oregon right now because they have reversed these terrible laws and now they're suffering the consequences and trying to figure out how they can scramble to get this education into the hands of kids. So I've got people all over the United States that are using Know Your Neuro, and now in England. I've got schools in England who are using it, which is great. If you need to reach me, please take a snapshot of this screen. You can reach me at Crystal at Dr. Crystal Collier, .com. And oh, here are the QR codes for my books. The children's book series, book number 1, Know Your Neuro, Adventures of a Growing Brain. It teaches kids all about their neurodevelopment. Then the books that are going to be coming out after book 1, actually book 2 is almost ready to be published. It's called Neuro Makes Good Choices. And then you, I just got my author's copy in the mail for this, but we're going to have more books out. You can follow the adventures of Neuro. Neuro sets boundaries. Neuro says no. Neuro feels feelings. Neuro accepts their body. Neuro learns self-control, all of the executive functioning skills. There is a K through 2 version and a grades 3 through 5 version. And of course, you get to go on adventures with Neuro. Whoop, there he is. The Neuro, the superhero brain. Help kids fall in love with their brain. All right, you guys, that does it for me. Do you guys have any questions?
I do have a question, Dr. Collier.
Sure.
I want to know when, I think I heard one presentation, another, wherein you felt maybe don't fight the battle of smoking cigarettes when they're trying to get off of marijuana or other products, you know, maybe let that one go. Now, given that it's this gateway drug or that it increases their risk of becoming addicted to other substances. What are your thoughts currently on that?
Oh, sure. So, okay, I want you to think about this in terms of prevention and then in terms of treatment. And so prevention, no drugs ever. And so as long as you can delay any kind of substance abuse or use, sorry, the better. So for prevention, no substances. And usually what you'll see is nicotine is potentially the first one. And so in my book, in the high school chapter, I have a section on room search guidelines, how to discuss it with kids, making sure that you do. One of the first things parents find is a vape or a vape cartridge. And so that is critical. As soon as you find that, make sure that you give them consequences, that you get them to a doctor, that you get them to a specialist so that they learn all about it, have them write a paper about it, really go big. Because it's a gateway drug, you want to delay. But if you find out they do, that's when big consequences start. And that's when all the education starts. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'll do this presentation for them online. And make sure they know what the consequences are going to be. Now, that's the prevention piece of it. And then, of course, once you know they might be using it, it's preventing further use because you can get addicted to it so quick and prime the brain for other things. Now, let's say you've got a kiddo that's already happened to. The genie is out of the bottle. They started vaping, they started smoking, they started drinking, and now they're using all of it. But they go to rehab and they get sober. One of the hardest things to do is to quit nicotine. And so it is much easier to stop using marijuana. It's much easier to stop using heroin than it is nicotine. So that's why I say we can use the harm reduction technique there and do one at a time. And so I got sober when I was 18, but I did not stop smoking until I was 34. So please know, and my doctor actually, when I went to rehab, he said, oh, don't stop smoking because it's going to be too difficult. And also back in the 80s, when I went to treatment in 89, everybody smoked in treatment inside. And so he knew that everywhere I'd go, meetings, everywhere I went, I would get triggered by nicotine all the time. Now, the policy of many treatment centers today are stop it all. Let's go ahead and get you off of everything. But one of the healthiest, or I shouldn't say healthiest, one of the best techniques is to put kids who are using or young adults who are using nicotine on a nicotine replacement system while they're trying to get off the other substances. So nicotine withdrawal symptoms are some of the most painful, uncomfortable symptoms. I'd have to say heroin is definitely worse, or fentanyl is worse because of the dope sickness that you get. But nicotine is so, because remember, nothing increases all those chemicals all at once, not even heroin. And so, but here's the interesting thing too. If you can get through 10 days of withdrawal from nicotine, you're good. It really is amazing. Once your body goes through that, it can really stop withdrawing rather quickly. But the withdrawal symptoms during that 10 days are incredibly difficult. So using a substance like Chantix, which blocks the nicotinic receptor sites, but it's very important to remember you can't use Chantix when somebody's also with detoxing from marijuana, because it can cause more psychotic symptoms and episodes. So you got to make sure a good detox is happening. So please hear me. I'm talking about the prevention versus treatment approach, depending upon the presentation of symptoms and use that child is going through.
That's a good explanation, because I always have that question too. It drives me nuts because I have both of my sons are addicted to nicotine vapes, both of them. And one's 24 and one's 20. And the 20-year-old used it because he found out he could lose weight. And he did.
Yep.
He lost a ton of weight. And
Yeah.
now he's full-blown addicted. So, okay, if and when a loved one or somebody or one of us is ready to quit vaping, what is the best treatment plan? What is a good program to turn to?
That's such a good question. Okay, I'm going to share a little bit of my experience with it as a recovering person and as a therapist who does smoking cessation hypnosis. So I actually quit doing hypnosis, and it was such a wonderful experience. But I was also ready. So if you've seen my presentation on stages of change, it's very important that we assess somebody's readiness. They need to be in the 95th percentile and above. And the reason that is because quit rates are so low for nicotine cessation that until somebody is really, really ready and they have a major reason. So I was getting married. I wanted to start a family. It was a huge reason for me to stop. And so I had a beautiful reason. And I also had a fantastic psychologist who was really great at hypnosis. And I remember having 3 cravings, and that was it. But I was really ready. So once someone is ready, they can move into preparation stage. And this is when you may do some research on it. And this is the time to buy patches, gum, the different things, maybe a prescription of Chantix or Wellbutrin. There are a lot of different options for smoking cessation. I tried them all. I tried Wellbutrin. It worked really well until I had an allergic reaction to it and broke out in hives. I tried the patches and then ended up smoking on the patches and having nicotine sickness because I was overdosing on nicotine. But the thing is, support your loved one in trying something, anything. Just give it a try. But it's so much better when you use other tools like people. I actually am on the 11th day of helping a sponsee of mine quit vaping. She is 11 days vape free today, but she's been starting and stopping quite a bit for the past few months. And so making sure that I did not judge her and support her. She's called me and texted me every single day. And I told her to do that within the first 15 days, because if she can get out of that 10, 15-day window, she's going to be just fine. However, when you have stress, big stress, it's very important to remember that that can trigger somebody to relapse, not just on nicotine, but on other drugs as well. So there are many options. Make sure you're ready, set a quit date, and have 2 or 3 tools that you can use. In my book, in the tools section, I have a lot of websites and references for tools that people can use. There are tip lines and hotlines. You can call somebody every day if you don't have a sponsor that can help you with this. That will help keep you accountable. So it's important to use your accountability buddies, a support system to help you do that. And unfortunately, if you hang out with a lot of people who do it, you're going to have to change your friends as well, or change your avenues. I stopped going to meetings where there were smokers and went to non-smoking meetings, and my friend group changed. It was really, really quite interesting. So lots of different ways. One more thing I wanted to say too, I'm seeing here in Houston that a lot of schools are confiscating nicotine pens that actually have marijuana in them. And the kids are saying and swearing up and down that they just bought nic pens, but they are testing them now, because the consequence for having nicotine is very different than the consequence for having marijuana. And unfortunately, we have to live with that double standard, but because nicotine is so much more prolific, it is. So we're seeing that drug dealers are making these nic pens and putting marijuana in it to get kids addicted to it. So beware of that too. Bart, thank you so much for your compliment. Thanks so much. Oh, Aubrey, thank you so much for asking me to do this again. I so appreciate whatever I can do to help further the cause. Please, you guys, go to knowyourneuro.org, spread it around. It is a really solid prevention tool. I wrote my dissertation on prevention. I've been doing it for many, many years. It's a really great tool. So let your schools and your coalitions know all about it.
Great. Thanks so much, Crystal.
Well, we thank you, Crystal. Another fabulous presentation. Thank you so very much. And we'll see you next time.
All right. Bye, you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Aubrey.
Thank you, Bart.
Take
Thank
care.
you, everybody, for coming.